the first thing you can actually do with this is build a basic guidance system. So similar to what you'd have in your tractor, but it's based on a Windows computer. So you needed a receiver and an antenna. So the receiver processes the information that comes in from the antenna. And literally with that kit, I was able to plug it into my existing Windows laptop, put it going, and I was able to get guidance.
GPS technology is now commonplace on many tillage farms. While most farmers use the basic functions, larger or more intensive enterprises such as potatoes and vegetables often rely on high accuracy autosteer RTK systems. These systems work exceptionally well, but it can be very costly, especially for smaller farm units. So are there any other practical alternatives? You are listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We'd really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Taking on a new project that allows you to learn new skills and build your own capacity can be very appealing, and we might just have one for you this week. I'm delighted today to be joined by Francis Quigley, a farm machinery specialist in Teagasc, to talk about a GPS autosteer system he built from scratch using the platform of AgOpenGPS. Francis, you're very welcome to the podcast. You might first start by explaining what is the AgOpenGPS system?
I honestly didn't know anything about it, I suppose, until March this year, and I was doing up a bit of an article on options for farmers, and it was actually when I did a search in ChatGPT for updates, it mentioned this AgOpenGPS. Honestly, I'd never heard of it, and I started digging in then to see what it was, and it's actually farmer designed autosteer system, which is kind of free for anybody to use, would say the documents and everything that they've put together. But it was originally designed by a chap called Brian Tichler. He's a farmer in Canada, and it was kind of a project, I think, that he started reading some of the articles in 2014 when he got very sick and was looking for something to keep himself occupied. He had an experience in actually medical electronics and decided to dip his toe into GPS basic guidance to start with. And over the years since, they've worked on autosteers, and there's a whole community after coming together, so that are all kind of working on this and sharing information, and it's all free. Anything people are doing is really available on online sites, and you can just go in there, download the material, and put it together.
So I suppose I seen this probably myself, 12 or 14 months ago, I suppose, as well. And it's a very interesting thing, and it's very accessible in the sense of there's loads of support and loads of videos to watch and that kind of stuff, but still a bit daunting. What, I suppose, persuaded you to say, I'm going to have a go at this?
Honestly, I delved into a few of the YouTube videos. It was where I kind of started, and looking at what people were doing, and even the I suppose to maybe gauge them as much as anything else to see how experienced they were. And in fairness, an awful lot of them, wouldn't have had an awful lot of electronics experience, and said that they were able to I suppose maybe get this up and running, so I said, look, I wouldn't have a huge amount of electronic experience, and I'd be happy enough wearing, lights and things like that. I've done some basic, we'll say, electronics around some of the microcontrollers and things like that, but nothing at all on this level, and as much as anything, it was more of a hobby, and to see if I could get this thing up and going, and I was kind of doing it in baby steps, so
so for those baby steps, then visualize for people where you start. What's the first thing you were trying to do, or what did you have to buy? Could you buy a unit and plug it in, or do you have to step back 2 or 3 steps from that?
Yeah, look, I suppose I decided that I was going to go step by step, and the first thing you can actually do with this is build a basic guidance system. So similar to what you'd have in your tractor, but it's based on a Windows computer. So you needed a receiver and an antenna. So the receiver processes the information that comes in from the antenna. But literally with those two pieces of kit, now that kit, is about I think it worked out, it's €200 plus the VAT, maybe plus delivery, so about €250 for that kit. And literally with that kit, I was able to plug it into my existing Windows laptop, put it going, and I was able to get guidance. Now, this was thrown on the front seat of the car to start with, just to try and to see. But even at that, I was amazed at how quickly I was able to get it up and running. I was a little disappointed with well, I won't say disappointed. I was kind of happy. It was down to about a meter accuracy. I think I was getting, to start with. Um, but actually, that meter accuracy turned out to be way more because actually, when I got out of the car, I realized I actually had the antenna on one side of the car, and when I just put it back into the middle of the car, I was down to literally below 20 centimeter accuracy, which with that €250 or so investment. And
So go back to that €250 investment. Is that something you need to take out your soldering iron and put little bits onto it and solder it on, or is it just a little piece you buy and you can order it online? It comes to you and it's a plug and play.
it is essentially a plug and play. Now, you have to load software onto the computer. There was a few little tweaks on the computer side of it, on the actual Windows computer to get it to talk to the board, but it is essentially plug and play. There was no soldering, or anything done with that. Like, I built. What I did build for that is I just created a little housing for the PCB board that comes, because it literally comes bare, like the inside of your computer essentially, like,
Yes.
and just something to protect that. That was the only thing that was.
Okay, so now you're at the stage where you have the little unit, you have it'll position you to within, let's just say 20 centimeters. Where did you take it from there?
I suppose I did two things at that point. One thing was I decided at that stage, right, if I can get this far, I think I'll be able to get the auto steer working. Now, look, it was a good bit of research, Joe. So, Joe, you're going on the computer there in the nights, Joe, looking at the forum and trying to figure out what was needed, and basically to there's a PCB needed, a printed circuit board for the auto steer system to work. But literally, the schematic diagrams and that for that are available. You download those diagrams and you actually email that off to a company in China. And they'll actually print the circuit board for you and post it back to you. Now, there's a minimum order of five, but the other thing that they do offer is they'll actually place all the components onto that. So you can actually order it with all the components on it, or you can actually order it as a bare PCB. So I ordered a five. You can a minimum order of two with the PCB. So that was probably those. I think I paid €120 for that whole order, which was the five boards, two of which had all. No, I won't say all. It had probably 80% of the components on it. So when you're ordering that, they may be out of stock on some components, and there is some items that need to be soldered onto it, But an awful lot of the work is done, like.
You have two things. One, it can receives the signal, if you like, so it positions you in the thing, and you have another board now that does the auto steer. So those two boards have to connect to each other, I presume, and to the computer as well.
They do, Michael. Now, that board needs extra items on it, so you need a microcontroller on that board. But again, they tell you the microcontroller that you use, it's like a little computer. Teensy 4.1 is the one that the system is designed for. The other thing you need on it is you need it's an IMU level sensor. So, if your tractor is tilting left or right, your antenna is not going to be directly over the wheels, So, you need to get that. You need something then that will talk to or control the motor, because it needs quite a bit of power. So there's a motor controller that goes onto that. But these are all items that literally, you may have to order them. Like I ordered those from three or four different places. I think the Teensy controller I got from a company called DigiKey. The motor controller came from another company called Botland. The IMU sensor was actually probably one of the harder things to find. They were. I'm not entirely sure why, but they were in scarce supply. Actually, I ended up ordering that on eBay from somebody in France. So it was kind of it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't a recognized shop as such, like But all those then will plug in along with the software on the computer, and you send software to that controller,
So if
they
I'm
talk to
somebody
each other.
listening to this now, I'm thinking to myself, geez, that's four or five different bits and pieces. I think now I'd be kind of turning off very quickly, kind of saying I could throw it
Yeah,
at the wall because it seems like an awful lot of things to pull together.
yeah,
How
no,
did you
no.
find that pulling together bit?
Yeah, really the biggest part, the biggest part of it was actually finding the bits and pieces and understanding how they interact with each other. But literally on we'll say that board that comes from China, there's actually plugs that you've soldered onto that and it is very clear and simple enough to you literally plug those in onto the boards
Like
and they
Lego
connect together.
for all the world.
Literally like Lego, And then in fairness, that's because so many people have been working on this board. Like originally, was it that chap Brian, when they had started out, they were soldering all these things together with wires going everywhere, and there was an awful lot of figuring out. But because that printed circuit board has all of those wires, and it has, all of the various components that are needed on that board, resistors and LEDs and all those actually all come on the board. So there's actually it makes it very simple, really. In hindsight, now look, there was days that you were kind of struggling with it. There's no doubt, but what's there as well, which was extremely helpful, is there's a Telegram. It's a bit like WhatsApp. Telegram is another version of WhatsApp, but there's a whole group on that. There's I think the last time I looked, there's about 1,700 farmers on that. And you put a question in there, and it's amazing how quickly somebody will come back to you, with the answer or guide you, even with a link on where to go to find the information you need.
So you have all the hardware bits, but they need to talk to each other. So you have the software bit then in behind that to get them to all to talk to each other. Was that reasonably well guided by the information on the internet?
It was. I mean, there's the main piece of software which is on the computer, So again, you actually need that even for we'll say the light bar system that I started with, So that's on the computer straight away. Connecting then to we'll say the PCB board, again, there was little tweaks which in I suppose areas that I wasn't fully comfortable with, setting up codes and things like that, for the computer to talk to each other. But again, like once you did a bit of digging, there was a video, or somebody directed you to a video showing you what you needed to do. And again, look, it varied a little bit. My my laptop was maybe a little bit newer than maybe the video was there, but you just between the video that was there and maybe the instructions that you got from other people, like you managed to muddle through. But there was nights there when you thought you were there, and but it just maybe delayed you by a week,
Right.
trying to dig again, like
So so you were doing most of this then on your laptop on a desk in an office, basically to a degree, to try and get it all set up, were you?
I was, yeah,
Right.
yeah. I started with with just no, you do really need a touchscreen computer, and you definitely need a touchscreen computer once you go into the tractor, and you can
Yeah.
do it on an ordinary laptop, but you're moving the mouse around even to highlight things on the screen, like so it's a little bit frustrating, like but I think that I bought myself a Windows Surface Pro or whatever, I kind of needed a laptop for at home anyway, So I bought that to start with, which is kind of probably a reasonably decent laptop, but maybe not the best thing for inside the tractor cab. Now there is guys using it inside the tractor cab, But when I moved to the tractor cab, then proper, I bought another tablet, It's kind of this Panasonic Tough Pad, but again, there was great advice there on which tablet to buy. That costs 175 euros on eBay, like So,
Yeah.
and it's designed for rough wear. It's the type of computer that a courier would use going around his van, or that would say maybe the guy maybe reading the meter would bring along to the house, like
Okay, so the next step then, so you had it all working on your desk and you're ready now to bring it to the tractor. So you've all the two or three boxes or whatever you have, you've cables and everything that needs to be put into the tractor. You might describe to me how you're fitting the auto steer part. Was it on the steering wheel or was it through valves underneath the cab somewhere?
I suppose there's kind of three main ways that it can be done, and I would say the AgOpen forum kind of give you those three options. Like The simplest and probably easiest is if you have an autosteer ready tractor. It means everything is actually on that tractor. And you can just download the software that will talk to the CAN bus. And in fairness to the forums, there's loads of guys out there who have, they'll tell you which wire, which plug you need to essentially plug 2 or 3 wires into the tractor, and it will actually use all the equipment that's on the tractor. But I went down the route. I wanted to put it onto an older tractor. Number one, look, I was doing it, kind of more as a hobby. Like it's my brother's farming at home. I'm not farming at home, So it was more of an interest than anything else. So it's on a 15-year-old Massey 54, 55 to put it on. So I needed to fit everything to that. So you need a wheel angle sensor. Now, literally, all the wheel angle sensor is doing is measuring to see what direction the front wheels are pointed. And to be honest, there's loads of different options there on that. The route I went down was it's a ride height sensor off a Land Rover Jeep, so that when they adjust the height of the Jeep, there's a sensor in underneath. That was, I think, €30 for that, and it basically, I had to come up with some way of mounting that. Again, there's loads of photographs and bits and pieces that people have come up with different ways of mounting these wheel angle sensors. So that'll measure that. There's 3 wires coming back from that to the cab. Then inside the cab, I went with a motor attached to the steering wheel. So because I didn't really I wanted to be able to take it all out of the tractor again, simple enough, in case it didn't work out, So I actually 3D printed a gear that mounts in under the steering wheel, and again, it comes in 3 parts, bolts together in under the steering wheel. So we didn't even have to take off the steering wheel, and mounted a motor then in behind that, that connects onto that, So that then is connected literally to the would say the PCB board, So there was the only other things I added was a switch to turn the system on and off, so you could literally press the switch rather than have to touch the screen to turn it on and off,
Okay, okay. So you spent a good bit of time doing that physically on the tractor, I presume, trying to get it up and running. So when it was in the tractor, was there a lot of setup from there?
No, honestly, when I went into the tractor, once it was in on the tractor, there's the first time you run, there's probably maybe a half an hour just going through setting up. It needs to understand where it is on the tractor, all the dimensions, putting all the dimensions in accurately, then actually driving so it can pick up steering angles and things like that for you. So, the more accurately you do that, the more accurate the whole system will be. So I think we gave about half an hour or maybe an hour, tweaking around with those at most, and then it was up and running, for that tractor,
Bringing it then from the farmyard out into the field, have you run it out in the field and what have you found?
Yeah, yeah. So again, I suppose I've ran it a few times, just trying to get it set up and trying to, with no machine on it, and um, literally, I suppose it was coming to the end of the season. The lads were going at silage, last cut of silage, and we put it on it's on the tractor that does the raking for the silage. So I said we'll try it on that, and I must admit, I don't have RTK correction, and you can put RTK correction on it, but even
Hmm.
without the RTK correction, I was amazed at the accuracy, that we were getting out of it. Like it was certainly down to 20 centimeters, or less, more accurate than even you would have driven it, so and extremely reliable as well, and relatively easy to use and operate,
And just a slightly different question because I don't know your brother. I'm not sure how technologically advanced he would be. How did he take to it?
Originally, I had put it in the tractor just as the light bar system, and he would have would say a proprietary GPS. Now, just a guidance system, that he uses for spreading
Hmm.
fertilizer, and has been using it for a good few years, but wouldn't be, I suppose, overly computer uh, comfortable, Joe, and is happy once he's been shown, like Joe. He did. There's no point saying otherwise. He did struggle a little bit with the screen and everything at the start, but again, it's no different than learning new pieces of software or anything like that, Joe. It's just getting used to that, Joe. His son Gillian, Joe, in fairness, he was on the rake and that he took to it very quickly, Joe, and even we're using it on the mower. Like literally the day we tried it, he was on the phone the day after. I only hope you come back, Joe, and we're going to go doing a bit of mowing or whatever. I want to try it again. Like Joe was very quickly took to it, like Joe. So and was pleasantly surprised with how well it was working, like Joe.
You've a lot of contact with farmers as much as I do, and knowing lots of farmers that you do know out there. Do you think this is a kind of project that people could actually take on as something? Maybe a tillage farmer isn't as busy maybe as this time of the year as he would have other times of the year. Something he could take on over, a couple of months to try and, get one of these systems up and running.
Yes and no. It's a straight answer to that. If you're looking for something that'll, plug in and go, and if there's an issue with it, you can just pick up the phone and talk to somebody, then I would definitely say, go down the route of a proprietary off-the-shelf system, like But like, if you're someone that's comfortable, with tweaking and tinkering a little bit, and I suppose, being happy that. Right, I might need to do a little bit of tinkering, before I start, each time just make sure the thing is right or whatever, and save yourself, a considerable amount of money, like there's probably very few people would spend, the 4,000 or 5,000 it would cost to put full auto steer on a 15-year-old tractor for doing, raking in the field, like but like the amount of money that's invested in this, like it makes that prospect way more interesting, and it's funny, like I suppose they would have had no experience of auto steer, and probably had no great interest in auto steer. But now that they've got a little bit of a taste for it,
it's like the electric windows in a car. Once you have them, it's hard to go back.
It is really, like it is. You kind of say I don't need these, like but once you do have it and a taste for it, like even would say doing spread and sorry, which with the likes of the trail and shoe and things like that, it gets a little bit harder to see where you're going, and it allows you to skip rows, that you don't have to go into the next row, so you don't have to turn the sharp on the headland, like there's a huge amount of potentials there. And to be honest, like this thing will actually do full headland turn for you, it will actually do section control as well, like I had the section control system. Now I have it working, but currently it's only working lights. It's turning on and off lights, I haven't connected into a machine yet, but there is guys out there that have that done, like that. And to be honest, I had that done before the auto steer system, like.
The bit, Francis, that people probably would be, if they want to go at it and tinker it, which is kind of fine, but once you're in a job and doing a job, say for a farmer, whether that happens to be, sowing, for instance, or, planting stuff in the field, once you start, it needs to work. And would you be reasonably confident that, once you have it set up reasonably well, there really will be no problems with it?
Yeah, look, it is extremely reliable. There's no point in saying otherwise. It's just where I suppose maybe the challenge is maybe you might have to do a bit of setup at the start of the job, but we found it so far to be extremely reliable, like so. I'd be confident enough that way. Again, look, it's down to your own. There is wires and things around the cab, and the whole thing is mounted. I suppose the effort that you put into building it too, will maybe have an influence on that too. Like with your soldering and your plugs and wires and things, if you're not crimping stuff 100% right, maybe they'll come loose. So it might be and trying to chase and track those, if you haven't built it, will be a harder challenge, like so.
Okay. Listen, Francis, I think that's a fantastic project. I think it's a project that we might have some people maybe might be interested in actually doing. Yeah, listen, we might come back to you again and might maybe chat to you and see how you're getting on. As just listening to you there, you might have the next part seems to be the section control bit. Maybe we'll come back to you and we'll chat to you and see how you're getting on with that.
Lovely, Michael. Yeah, thanks a million.
More details on the AgOpenGPS are in the show notes, so have a go from there. So that's it for this week. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.